Now, the coronavirus has, it's really taken over the world. In more ways than one. You can't go on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or really any of the other social media sites without everyone talking about it. It's a thing to see, even when other big news has happened, in the world of politics, which is usually what I use social media for. There were always other things going on. Now, everyone is talking about the coronavirus, talking about it, speculating about it, etc., etc., etc. But there are other things that are going on in the world, other things that demand our attention. Such as this second story, which comes to us from New York City, okay? A guy by the name of Julian Hornik, okay? Young guy. I think he's only early 20s, I think, okay? He's a songwriter in New York City. From his website, okay? This is a little description that I got from his website. Quote, he, Julian Hornik, wrote the music and lyrics for Giovanni's Room, an adaptation of the James Baldwin novel, and 10, a musical based on the life of Tennessee Williams. His commission from the New York and Los Angeles gay men's choruses commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots premiered summer 2019 at Carnegie Hall and Walt Disney Concert Hall, respectively. Queer Z, a song cycle on the contemporary queer youth experience commissioned by the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus, premieres at Davis's Symphony Hall, March 2020. Okay, so he's not just someone who's bumming around on YouTube, writing songs and hoping to get some hits. Okay, this is a guy who has some cultural weight behind him when he's written songs and lyrics for plays and when he's had his stuff performed at Carnegie Hall, right? That's pretty important in the world of music. Again, Walt Disney Concert Hall. It doesn't have the weight of history like Carnegie Hall does, but still, Walt Disney. And I go back and forth between deciding whether, the Communist Party in Beijing rules the world, or whether Walt Disney owns the world. I think that when we get up to the highest echelon, we're actually going to find out that Mickey Mouse does run the world, but that he actually became a communist sometime in the 80s. And so, it's actually a unified, it's a unified theory in other words, okay? Well, Julian Hornik, he's written a new song, which was called The Origin of Shayna Maidel, which is based on, get ready for it, okay, a real life 16-year-old drag queen with a Jewish mother. He's written a song about a 16-year-old drag queen. And as you could probably guess, the song is nothing but praise. It's an hagiography, right, of this 16-year-old drag queen and about drag in general. Now, I'm not going to put a clip in of the music, and I'm not going to link to it because I really don't want to spread it around. I really, really don't, because there are some things that just really shouldn't be spread. So here are some of the lyrics. I listened to it. I found it on the website Queerity. So if you want to go to Queerity and, type in Julian Hornik, you're going to find it if you're really that curious about it. But I listened to it. I listened to this song a couple of times to try to pick out the lyrics, right? Because that's really, really important. Because what is the message that a song is trying to convey? It's in the lyrics, right? So what were some of the lyrics in this song, The Origin of Shayna Maidel? About, again, a 16-year-old boy who's doing drag. Just wanted to make sure that we were clear on this. Okay, some of these lyrics. About the time he's 3, little Jamie's free to be Shayna Maidel. Destined for the lights of Crystal City Foggy Bottom. Pretty girl, dashing boy, you go ahead and set your sights as high as hell. June Waters and Fiddler, RuPaul and Bette Midler swim around in his head. Sure, math is essential, but not consequential like Baldwin and Shear. Teens are a mystery, but give them a history to show that they're there. Okay, those are some of the lyrics in that song. Okay, now this song is pure propaganda. That's the only word that can adequately describe it. So let's go through some of the ways that it is propaganda. In the first place, the idea that a 3-year-old knows without a shadow of a doubt not just what he wants to be as a career, but who he is substantially is bogus. It's not even scientific, right? Kids at that age, they are still learning about the world around them. They're still learning about themselves. They do not have some sort of innate idea in their heads that, oh, I'm gay. Oh, I'm trans. Oh, I'm drag. Oh, I'm a dinosaur or something like that. They just don't, because their minds are still developing. Their minds are still developing. And so to say that a 3-year-old is free to be Shayna Maidel, that he knows who he is. And here's another thing. In the song, the mom knows that he's a drag queen, that he's destined to be a drag queen, because at 3 years old, he's singing into a broom, like a microphone. He's doing pirouettes, which doesn't mean anything. Again, kids can't use their imaginations. No. If kids use their imagination in the right way, that's a sign that they are now, something like, something. They're gay, they're trans, they're drag, they're bisexual, they're genderqueer, whatever. And that means that they now have to be pushed into that role. They have to be forced into that pigeonhole at an early age. That's the first little piece of propaganda. It's also propaganda because it buttresses the idea that to be a good parent, you have to allow this sort of thing to happen. If you know at 4 years old, if you know that your child is destined to be a drag queen or is transgender at 4 years old, then by God, you are a terrible, horrible, abusive, even evil parent if you do not kowtow to that. If you don't allow them to put on makeup, if you don't put on makeup for them, if you don't, like if they're a little boy, if you don't dress them like a girl, put on makeup, right? Get them girls' toys, etc., etc. When you, quote unquote, know, or the child has told you that he's transgender because he's a boy but he's really a girl, then you are a bad parent. Then you are the villain of the piece. Okay? It also, I just have to point this out, it really also brings the question, how did this 3-year-old know, right, that he was, how did this 3-year-old become free at 3 to be Shayna Maidel? How did this little boy James, how did all of a sudden he become free to become Shayna Maidel, which is Yiddish actually, which means pretty girl? Okay, how did he know? Because his mom pushed it into him. His mom pushed him into it. That's the meaning that I take from this song. Because otherwise, doing pirouettes, singing into a microphone means nothing. This mom then basically cut off her son's free will. Cut it off by the legs and said, you're a drag queen. You're something like this. Which is why she pushed it onto him. Because otherwise, as a teenager, why would his mind be filled with images of RuPaul? Okay, who is a very well-known, famous, maybe we'd even say infamous, drag queen himself, right? He's the one, he has the reality TV show, RuPaul's Drag Race, that AOC actually is a guest judge on, if you remember that Rolling Stone from a couple of weeks ago, right? How did this kid even find out about RuPaul, right? Why are images of him swimming around in his head? It's because it was pushed onto him. It was pushed onto him by his mother. Because the mother wants him to do this, right? So there again, the propaganda. Good parents want to do this. They will push this onto their children at an obscenely young age. Take away all their free will and just say, yes, you're going to do this. Yes, you're going to do this. Yes, you're going to do this. I wonder what would happen. Remember in the old days when if a kid, was particularly religious about saying his prayers and sharing and doing good things like that, some parents would immediately jump to the conclusion, oh, he's called to be a priest, or he's called to be, or she's called to be a religious sister or something. And that's what some parents would actually push onto them. They would actually say, wouldn't it be nice to be a priest, decorate their rooms and all these things. And maybe their kid was like 5-6 years old. That would be that's going overboard. Even I, would say that that's going overboard. You don't push that onto a kid, especially when they're that young. Maybe they're just a particularly good kid, who really, maybe he's just a good kid, right? Everyone on the left would say that would be abusive. Pushing the idea onto your kid that he is supposed to become a priest or she is supposed to become a sister or something like that. But this, on the other hand, that's good and gold. Okay? So that's another thing. Another piece of propaganda that it pushes is this idea that for representation, you have to teach LGBTQIA2 plus history, because otherwise these kids are going to be left all alone. They're not going to have any role models. They're not going to know that other people just like them, right, came in the past. They're not going to have a mirror from which they're reflected. If you watched the regular On the Stone video from this week, which was a few days late, mea culpa, I have been traveling. That's my excuse and I'm sticking with it. It pushes that idea as well, right? With the line that says, teens are a mystery, but give them a history to show that they're there. That's a straight up reference to things like that, to this LGBTQIA plus history. So it reinforces that piece of propaganda as well. But all this pales into utter insignificance. Forget about everything like that, okay? The big takeaway from this is that this is a song about sexualizing kids, okay? Drag queening, okay? Drag queens are all about sexualization. And we've talked about this before here on the channel. If you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you've seen me talk about this as well, where drag queens were stripping, right, in front of kids at drag queen story time. Or drag queens at drag queen story time were teaching kids how to twerk. Or there was the one, a drag queen was actually doing some sort of an erotic dance, kind of the PG-13 version of an erotic dance, in front of a prepubescent girl. I don't know exactly how old the little girl was. She couldn't have been more than 7. Okay, probably like 5 or 6. Okay, so drag queening in and of itself is sexualization. That's the entire point of being a drag queen, is sexualization. Okay? And now this song is legitimizing it. Legitimizing it when the kid is 3 years old, okay? Because again, officially this is supposed to be about a 16-year-old drag queen, but again, the song starts when the kid, Jamie, is 3 years old and his mom starts pushing this idea that he is a drag queen. In his heart of hearts, in his core, he's a drag queen. That's when she starts pushing this onto him, when he's 3 years old. So this is a blatant attempt at the sexualization of children at the 16-year mark and even way down at the 3-year-old mark, which then leaves a very interesting and foul-tasting question in one's mouth. If 16-year-olds and 3-year-olds can be sexualized, then what child can't be sexualized? Honestly, right? If a 16-year-old can be sexualized, why not a 15 or a 14-year-old? Right? If a 3-year-old can be sexualized, why not a 4 or a 5 or a 6-year-old? Why not a 2-year-old? Hell, we have we have psychiatrists, even worse, because they're medical doctors. We have psychiatrists who now say that if your 1-year-old unsnaps his onesie and waves it around in a certain way, they are actually giving you a nonverbal communication about their gender. That's where we have reached in all this. So everything we have reduced, we've gone one better than Freud. We have reduced everything to sex and identity. And because of that, okay, we are now sexualizing everyone. And that has actually been one of the end goals of the sexual revolution. To be honestly, this is one of the end goals, because if a 16 and a 3-year-old can be sexualized, it means that everybody can be sexualized. Anybody and everybody can be sexualized. And when that happens, okay, the sexual revolution will really have, I don't want to say come to fruition, because it can always get worse. It's like the Mad Hatter and Alice in Wonderland. You can always have more tea. You can always have more. But you can always get worse. You can always get worse and go down deeper into the mud. But if this idea actually takes hold, that everyone and anyone, regardless of age, can be sexualized, then the sexual revolution really will have taken a giant leap forward, because it will simply have reinforced and strengthened the idea that sex is our God, right? That's the entire point of the sexual revolution. And this song, which normalizes that, which actually makes it a great and courageous thing to do, both for a 3-year-old and parents, helps that become a reality. It helps the sexual revolution take that giant leap forward by sexualizing everyone, by basically making us nothing more than meat puppets when we get right down to it. Because when everything is reduced to sex, right, whether how you identify, whether it's gender identity, whether it's orientation, but when everything boils down to sex, everything at its root is sex, that's what you're saying. We are nothing more than just meat puppets. Yeah, you can add other things, but take away those things. If those things are lost, then that's all that remains. Sex. Something for someone else's pleasure, for someone else's amusement. That is what this song is at its heart. That's what the message of this song is. That's the ideology and the narrative that this song, and Julian Hornik, the author and the composer and the writer of this song, is pushing. That is story number 2.